course, if you grew up in a poor, large immigrant family, chances are you're either Irish Catholic or Hispanic, and I was lucky enough to be both, so I had a head start when it came to social justice activism. Both of my parents were immigrants. My father was Francisco Estevez, or as they say in Spain, Estevez. He was born in northern Spain near a little village called Vigo on July 2nd, 1898, the very day that the United States declared war on Spain. My mother was Mary Ann Phelan. She was born May 22nd, 1903, in a tiny village at the center of the Irish Republic, Borris-a-Cane, County Tipperary. They immigrated separately to the United States, of course, but they met in Dayton, Ohio, and were married in 1927. They had 12 pregnancies. 10 survived, 9 boys and 1 girl. I was their 7th son. My real name is Ramón. I stayed in Dayton until I finished high school, and then I decided to go to New York and pursue a career in the theater. I started caddying when I was 9 years old at this exclusive country club in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio. And so I saw how the upper crust lived. And I experienced the degradation, if you will, of being a servant to the overprivileged. And I did it for 9 years. And when I was 14, I organized a caddy union. And we went out on strike. The entire adventure only lasted about 72 hours, but it was a life-changing experience for me because when we were striking for better working conditions and higher wages, of course, and we chose Tuesday, which was Ladies' Day. We knew they were not going to carry their own bags. This is before golf carts, you know. And so we just had a sit down in the parking lot. And the caddy master came out and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, we're not doing this anymore until we get higher wages and so forth." And he said, "Well, you're on private property." He said, "You better get your asses out of here now." And that was the first time I'd heard that phrase. I'd been working there at the time for 5 years, from early every spring until late every fall since 1949. And now I was hearing this phrase that was so foreign to me: "You're on private property." Now, I was no longer welcome here because I refused to be a servant, or at least I wanted to serve on my term. And they just weren't having it. And so we were all thrown off the property. And I came back some weeks later because, frankly, I was that good a caddy. And there was a lot of requests for me, and my brothers as well. So I went back to that servitude until I left home when I was 18 years old. It was the longest job I ever had. The second longest job I had was the West Wing. But I just had that sense that I would always be looking at a situation from the other side. And after a while, and that was not by choice. I was kind of put into this situation because of birth and family upbringing and all of that. But as I became a young adult, it became choice. I was very conscious of choosing what side to support, where I wanted to stand. It was very, very conscious. And I knew from an early age that it was going to be costly. I think if what you believe doesn't cost you anything, then you're left to question its value. So my positions were always, always tenuous. I could not speak up or stand up when I witnessed some form of injustice or cruelty or bullying
My dear father, Francisco, I'm sure is turning over in his grave just up the street here in Calvary Cemetery. As you heard earlier, he was determined that I should attend the University of Dayton, and I was equally determined to go to New York and begin a career in the theater. It became a great source of tension between us, and I thought maybe the best way I could convince him that I was not university material was to send him a message in no uncertain terms that I did not belong here. So I took the entrance examination and I failed it on purpose. In fact, I understand that to this day I still hold the record for the lowest degree in the history of this university's entrance examination. Out of a possible 100, I scored a 3. But now, looking back on it, I'm not so sure I would have done any better if I'd really tried. My father and I healed our rift, and he blessed me, and I went off to New York to begin a career. He was my first hero. He was the best man I ever knew, and I'm honored to remember him here this day with thanksgiving and praise. My father was born in Spain, and actually his birthday was significant because it was July 2nd, 1898. And I always thought that, and I was told it was the very day the United States declared war on Spain. But word hadn't gotten to Galicia yet, you know. And my dad was explained to us that, Galicia was so isolated and so poverty-stricken and so, there was no infrastructure. So it took a shorter time to get to the New World on a ship leaving from Vigo than it did to get on a horse or a cart and get to Madrid. So he took the shorter route to the New World. And he landed in Port of New York, but they didn't stay. He had a cousin with him, and they went to Cuba. So he stayed in Cuba for a couple of years working in the sugarcane fields. And he came in through Miami as a Cubano and worked his way up to Dayton, Ohio, because he'd heard about this factory. The National Cash Register Company was hiring there, and they were welcoming immigrants. Most of them were Italians, and he was one of the only Spaniards. But at any rate, that's how he got to Dayton. My mother came from this little village in Borisacane in northern Tipperary, and her whole family were very involved in the War of Independence, and her brother Michael was a volunteer for the Irish, the IRA, and we discovered was a carrier for the IRA, carrying messages. She spoke Gaelic, which was a big telltale sign, because Gaelic was not taught in the schools. It was the language of the IRA. It's how they could communicate without the Brits knowing what they were saying. But at any rate, they saw a civil war coming in 1922, and they sent my mother to the United States to stay with a cousin, knowing the fighting would end soon, one way or another. Either it would be a free state or it would be a united republic. And so she came to stay with this cousin in Dayton, and meanwhile she met this which she called the Spaniard, and they fell in love, and she stayed, and they became citizens together. In the old days, you used to go to what they called citizenship school, and she taught him how to speak English. He couldn't speak English, and they were married in 1927. They had 12 pregnancies, 10 survived, 9 boys, 1 girl. I'm a 7th son, and he was sent to Bogota, Colombia for a while because he spoke Spanish. They lost a baby there. She got pregnant again and was afraid to lose another one. So her mother was ailing. She went back to Ireland to stay with her, and my oldest brother, Manuel, was born in Ireland. And then he got reassigned to Bermuda, and they moved to Bermuda, and 5 more lads came. Then the war came, and Bermuda belonged to the Brits, and the Brits were already in it, but the United States wasn't yet in 1940, so they came back to the United States, and I was the first Yank born here.
We are looking for Mary Ann Estevez.
Well, my dad, worked in a factory for almost 46 years and was not allowed to belong to a union. So, no, I understood it, from the top down, My dad worked in this place and never made more than $170 a week. After 46 years, that was his top pay. And, he was Hispanic and an immigrant and started at the bottom, worked his way up as far as he could go. And that was the best he could do because there was no union. We grew up Catholic as well, so I had a sense of social justice as a child. I grew up with it. Yeah, it was morally right to do the right thing. And my dad was such a scrupulously honest man that it was very hard to be around him because he knew when you were lying. And we knew how honest he was, and we knew that he knew. And so it was always easier you didn't have to remember what you said if you told the truth. It was the same story all the time. But if you lied, you had a real problem trying to remember your lie. And so I owe that to my father, really. My dad was old world, and he was very determined that I should get at least some measure of a higher education. And he had put a few dollars aside every week for that, just for me. And I felt it was useless. I was determined to be an actor. I already assumed I was an actor. I just had to go and do it. And he didn't have any understanding about that at all. And so he insisted that I take the entrance examination to the University of Dayton in my hometown. It's a pretty prestigious school. And so to please him, I took the test. To please myself, I threw it. The dean of men called my dad in and myself, and my dad refused to believe it was true, and he showed him the results, and he said to my father, look, I don't want to offend you or anything, but, a monkey could have sat there and with boxing gloves on and gotten a higher, multiple choice than your son did. So he's trying to tell you something, Mr. Estevez, and I was, And he was a terrific guy. He was very shy outside the house. Inside the house, he was a tiger, and he loved westerns. And he'd come home in the night, and he'd love to watch all these westerns. And we would get into arguments about acting and about my wanting to go to New York in my senior year, particularly. And some of them got pretty heated. And he was a Gallego. So if I tried to do his accent, I wouldn't do it justice. I mean, he had a very deep basso profundo voice, and he talked much like this. He would talk to me, Ramon, what is this thing in the theater? You have no talent. You have none. You can't. I said, what do you mean I have no talent? How do you know? He said, well, you can't sing. You don't play the music. You don't dance. What? Why are you going to do in this in the theater? I said, Pop, you come home every night and you sit in front of this television and you watch those westerns. Do you see anybody singing or dancing or playing a musical instrument? I swear to God, he said, but Ramon, you don't know how to ride a horse either.